Welcome, everyone. We are live. I am here with, of course, the one and the only Thunderous one, whom I've met, and he's even more handsome than I am. And fantastic guy, great personality, very intelligent. And of course, we're here with the Patriotic Christian, whom I saw on a recent show with Eric, and it was very, very good. And we're here to discuss the situation in the UK, because is the UK okay? And it looks like it is not. So yeah, so Thunderous, say hello to everyone, and what have you been up to, and what are we talking about today? Just give us a brief intro, and then we'll move to the Patriotic Christian.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome to you, Lloyd, and thank you for having me on to your show. It's nice to link up with you again. And this evening as well with the Patriot Christian. This is my first encounter with the Patriot Christian. We haven't had much of an opportunity to speak before the show, so forgive me if there's some kind of dialogue where we're not quite matching with each other. We haven't met before, so forgive the chat for that. But welcome to be here, everyone. And as far as what I've been doing, I've been prostituting myself to the fascist system of things, working hard and watching and observing the England and by extension Europe and what's taking place with the Islamic movement.
Yeah, that's very disturbing. We're also watching it, and I'm very concerned. Yeah, I think it's become a huge thing, and also, of course, I believe the current government under Starmer. Everyone is using a lot of very socialist-oriented names to describe him, but they've slid to minus 14% in popularity, and he's being booed and heckled wherever he goes. It's pretty bad. And yeah, the Patriotic Christian, yeah, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so give us a brief introduction. I know a little bit about you, but tell us about what you've been up to and just.
Okay, yeah, sure. So currently we're in the middle of arranging and managing the whole security detail for the next rally, which will be held beginning at Downing Street next month. So I'm going to be part of security next month. Again, I was security for one of the YouTubers that was there last time, but this time this will be more of crowd control. So I've currently been doing that, but I've also been getting myself more involved with some more YouTube creators to come on to more channels like this, to grow my second channel because my first channel got removed. So yeah, I'm trying to juggle everything at once currently.
Yeah, no, sorry to hear about your channel being removed. I'm just amazed that, my channel is definitely throttled, I would have to say, given when I look at the statistics, but I'm surprised considering how blunt I've been about many things, my channel is still here. So
that'll change.
Yeah. So Thunderous, I'll begin with you. We had a brief chat about this, and you sent me a couple of links. And but what are your thoughts on what's happening in the UK? And we will bring up those two links as well.
I think from my perspective, there's a lot of things that are taking place. I think, if you recall the last time we had this conversation, several key points were brought up. One of those being the moment, in my estimation and my experience of being in England, is the writing of or the release of the Satanic Verses 1989. That, for me personally, is a pivotal point where Islam was probably just one of those religions, a bit like Sikhism and Hinduism, that was prevailing in the country. But it raised its head to a national level where people recognize that actually there's something going on in this country that we've not been aware of. We're now aware of it as a byproduct of the Satanic Verses. And I think that was a moment in history that people should have taken more notice of, but haven't. And subsequently, since then, I think those with that are more diligent, more discerning, and more probably inclined to want to do research have probably taken that as a catalyst to research more about Islam, and have, as a byproduct of that, have seen the incremental increase of Islam prevailing within politics, prevailing within the media, on chat shows and such, in the promotion of Islam, but also in the defense of its ideology and some of its adherents, and some of the events that have taken place subsequently since 1989 on the world scene.
Okay, yeah. Your thoughts?
Well, Islam definitely has been one of the most talked about religions in the UK currently, especially with the rise of the rape crimes, grooming gangs. The latest headlines have been mainly around the British or the far right, and they're trying to hide away from Islam now. So what you're seeing is the British public, they're trying to talk about Islam, but you've got the establishment that are trying to hide away from it. And more important, well, worsely, they're even targeting the British for talking about it and trying to, well, they have actually thrown people in prison for even talking about it. So it's
like 1,000 arrests that have either taken place or are planned for people who said hurty words on Facebook, for the most part. So they're yeah, Thunderous.
I was just going to say, maybe Patriotic Christian might recall this, but in the late 80s, there was a period of time, and I just want to mention this as an example, that in the British media at the time, for instance, Hollywood had produced certain movies, and within those certain movies, I think Zoltan, Howard the Dracula, one of the Omen movies, and maybe Cujo, they featured a dog. It was a Rottweiler. And they referred to it, probably because of the type of movies that the dog was in, they kind of referred to it as a devil dog. Then what you heard subsequently thereafter that was children or adults being attacked by Rottweilers. And you pretty much got that for a couple of months. And then all of a sudden it died down and you've not really heard much of it since. The truth of the matter is Rottweilers are nothing like that in the first place. And if a dog does behave like that, you have to blame the owner. However, in the late 90s, we started hearing of things like acid attacks. We started hearing about female genital mutilation. Laws in this country had to be defined as to how you determine what kidnapping is. We started hearing of things like honor beatings and honor killings and forced marriages. And something that the Patriot has just said then, that the media are hiding things away. And this is something that I've been observing too. So these things became a hot topic for a moment in the media. Then all of a sudden, nobody wants to talk about these topics that are quite unique to the Islamic community. Okay. And it's not as if these actions by the Islamic community have suddenly stopped. It's not as if the British media has brought attention to the Islamic community's insular activities of how they apply discipline amongst themselves have all of a sudden stopped. They're obviously still ongoing. I mean, it was brought up by Rafe Hedaya that London is still, or England is still, the capital of acid attacks. So obviously they're still going on. Why are we not getting reports of acid attacks from the Pakistani Muslim community, or, if you want, the Muslim community at large? And we're not. And I think Pedro has mentioned a very good point that you tend to be hearing something about when a reaction, not an action, let's have it right, a reaction for what is determined or being referred to as the far right, which I think is deliberately served up as a pejorative, okay, which is a blanket phrase that if you say anything about Islam, if you say anything about the narrative that is being promoted by the government, you are now being branded or labeled as far right. It's a negative, critical, pejorative. And for me, there is something within that. But I think for me personally, with what Patriot was saying, it extends a little bit further back to the 90s.
Yeah, Patriot, do you want to say something before I jump in?
Yeah, I was going to say, for an example of one unjust punishment was a guy who was chanting, "Who the F is Allah?" He got 18 months in prison. He had no previous convictions whatsoever. And you see people like him who will get jailed for just chanting that without being violent or throwing anything like, petrol bombs or whatever they make out in the press. Yet you're seeing migrant rapists be given community services or being slapped.
There are migrants who have stabbed 14-year-olds to death. There are migrants who have hacked 9-year-old boys to death with a machete who have had no jail time.
Exactly.
Just on that, I don't know if Patriot recalls this. Maybe you do, Lloyd, but I'm hoping that Patriot does. I think it was last year, may have been earlier on this year. Just before we go any further, Patriot, are you a football fan?
Yes, yeah.
Who do you support?
Bristol Rovers.
Okay, I'm a Tottenham boy, all right? The point, a reason why I mentioned football is because you might recall this year where 5 men were jailed and sentenced.
Isn't that hate speech? Because, guys, everyone knows you have to support Man United. This is blasphemy and hate speech. I need to call the police.
But there were 5 guys that were jailed for a total of 30 years for streaming football. and they were streaming it for £10 a month. They got 30 years between 5. Or their only crime, okay, I would call it a naughty crime. I certainly wouldn't refer to it as an evil or a bad or a sadistic crime. But with what you're just saying there about rape and the disproportionate sentences that are being administered to people of certain communities or people of certain committing certain crimes is beyond the realms of comprehension now, as far as the legal judicial system is concerned at this moment. I don't think we have one. I think we have a system that is designed to intimidate honest people that are very concerned about what's taking place within the community and by extension the country that they live in.
And what's worse is that they're refusing, the government, well, the whole establishment actually is refusing to release data on these crimes and also data within the migrant demographic. So anything to do with Islam or anything to do with immigration, they won't release because they know the British public, they won't be as tolerant anymore. So
that is true. That I think they're trying to preempt. Oh wow! Thank you very much, Nick. Says God bless you and your family for this, Lloyd. Thank you, Nick. You'd be surprised how far this really goes, given the situation that I have to deal with here in Poland. So this is very, very much appreciated. But yeah, chat about that another time. But thank you very much for that. Sorry to interrupt you there. It's Byron, right?
Yeah. People call me Roan. Yeah.
So again, we should call you
Roan. But yeah, anything's fine.
Roan.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple of points that you've raised there, and between you and Thunderous. I mean, there was someone who I was watching the judge said that someone had written anti-establishment rhetoric on Twitter. Anti-establishment. So if you are not for the current establishment, you will go to jail. Which is, how is that a crime, being anti-establishment?
Exactly. Right? It's not against the law.
So this was incredible. The fact that he's saying, well, you're against us, which is partisan. He's taking a side, right? On another, then you had your government, your current government, kneeling for the BLM, right? Yeah. Supporting Palestinian Hamas marches, right? So that, again, they're partisan, they're favoring one side. And then you saw Keir Starmer having multiple discussions about, we stand with the BLM rioters who were assaulting police, assaulting aid workers, burning things down, hurting people. And in the US, I mean, they killed dozens of people, right? They caused billions of dollars worth of damage in the UK and the US. And then he's like, but we understand your motivations. We understand your frustrations, and we support your cause. We understand why you're doing this. But of course, if you're white, working class, and British, and you take one step in the wrong direction against the government, it's like you're the far right.
Yeah.
And to add to the point on the far right, the idea of the far right, obviously, that is simply saying Nazi in code, right? They're saying you're Nazi because you are nationalistic and you are proud of your country. You're a patriot. However, this is another issue that has become a major propaganda point. But the far right is not. Let me start again. Back in the 60s, back in the 50s, because of embarrassment of what the Nazis had done, the socialists had to try and separate themselves from the Nazis and the fascists, who are socialists. They simply are non-Marxist socialists. So because Marx had claimed that there would be a revolution of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie because of economic disparities. And of course, capitalism raised the standard. And then, of course, people then just, their lives improved immeasurably. So therefore, he had a failed economic policy. He had a failed prediction, failed profit, in other words. And of course, and they also had this complete idea of social relativism, where they had the international communism, Comintern, whereas you had the fascists and the Nazis, who are national socialists, who are, their 25-point plan is a socialist plan. It is just another socialist movement, another variant of socialism, as I said, non-Marxist socialist. And they simply were focused on their own group, an in-group preference rather than an out-group, which is why you have, with the current socialists in the US and the UK and France and Belgium and Holland and all of that, although that government has not changed, you have open borders because we're all the same, social relativism, right? But what you have is, so there was an attempt to conflate patriotism with Nazism, but the Nazis were effectively race socialists, as opposed to economic socialists who were race socialists. And of course, but their racism was based on scientific Darwinism. We can blame Darwin squarely for that, right? And then even Marxist socialism, if you read what Marx had to say about Jews, Marx hated Jews too. So again, now you're looking at also a hatred of Jews, but also you have this in-group, this out-group preference, and this has nothing to do. So this is not. So they try to basically demonize. The left has tried to demonize patriotism, and it has tried to demonize love of country, and basically declare that is Nazism. And it's been a very clever move, and it's been used very widely. And Keir Starmer's doing exactly that. Your thoughts on that?
I would say, to add on to that, I think people are, when they brand you right wing, they're almost and they're trying to imply that you're a nationalist. I think, for me personally, I look at genocide. I'm going to assume you call yourself the Patriotic Christian, Rowan. So I'm going to assume that at the very minimum you accept the biblical narrative as a reality. I know Lloyd does, and I certainly do.
Yeah, I do.
If you look at Genesis, where it says that we're made in God's image, and if you go to the Book of Romans, where it talks about the conscience and we do things of the law because it's written on us, I think a lot of things that people are reacting to, then I don't think they're acting out of patriotism. Okay, I think a lot of people, there is within the human being psyche a sense of what is right and what is wrong morally. And a lot of people are reacting, in my estimation, about what is wrong. You have things like whistleblowers. Whistleblowers don't predicate their whistleblowing on nationalism or patriotism. It's because they've seen something happen within the banking industry or the pharmaceutical industry or a chemical industry or a flight industry. I'm thinking of Boeing recently, and 2 whistleblowers recently died. You know, that's a separate discussion in itself. But the point being, we see something wrong. It affects our sense of righteous indignation that's been implanted within our psyche from God. So we voice a concern over it because we see if we don't say anything, then that injustice is only going to expand. It's only going to escalate. It's only going to increase. So there has to be a bulwark against it. And it's interesting that it's almost like a psy warfare, where they're branding you as far right, or giving you or labeling you with this pejorative, almost in some way as a warning to everybody else to do not react to what you're seeing or what you think you're discerning or what you're inferring from the way that things are taking place in the media at the moment, because we will come after you. And it's almost as a preempt, because they know that the indignation within many human beings is to want to respond, because what we are looking at the moment, it's emotional. From our arguments are intellectual and logical. Their arguments are emotional. Because we may touch on this in a moment, and forgive me if I'm going ahead. But if you look at, say, the information within that document that I sent you, the All-Party Parliamentary Group of British Muslims, that is an emotional argument. It's not a logical argument. But we'll go into that later.
Yeah, Ron, up to you. Your comment next, because after this I'll bring up those questions I sent you. We may as well try and discuss them here now, and then get to the 2 documents that Thunderous sent as well. It's just 7 questions that we can sort of raise and discuss between the 2 of you. Your comment?
As well, I totally agree with basically what Thunderous has said, everything that I would basically say anyway. But in terms of the patriot side of it, he's right, because that sense of loving our country is being removed, and you've got history being rewritten, statues being torn down, all of that nonsense. But we've also got, like he said, the moral side of the argument. When you look at something that's going on, and you say, hang on a minute, this is not right, and then when you speak up against it, whether or not your belief in politics or whether you love your country or not, speaking up against some of the things that are happening here, you're getting labeled. And because of that, obviously, there comes your character gets tarnished. And you could face prosecution, for instance, just for even speaking up, saying, hang on a minute, why is this happening? Why is this? Why is it predominantly Pakistani Muslim men that are raping the majority of the girls that are being raped here in the UK? Just for asking that very question, you'll be classed as Islamophobic or racist. And people are too scared now to actually stand up and speak about these things, including the media, including the police, because the police, they've admitted themselves they didn't want to. I think it was Rotherham police didn't want to go and arrest some of the suspects involved with the 1,400 children that were groomed in Rotherham, because they didn't want it to be branded as Islamophobic. So there's a lot of fear from what you're seeing from the mainstream media and also from the establishment, which are obviously they both they're both hand in hand working together. Yeah. So and with that, you're seeing a lot more relationship now between the Muslim community and the establishment. They're actually getting inside of it now. So we're seeing new Muslim political parties come out of nowhere. We're seeing more commentators on the news in regards from the Muslim community, and they're basically taking over absolutely everything. And even when they go on to podcasts and stuff, for instance, Mohammed Hijab and Dilly Hussein, they've openly spoke about infiltrating our military, our political system, to try and take over the country and make Britain an Islamic state. Yet nothing gets said about them, or they don't get in trouble for it by any means necessary, by any way, shape or form. And anyone who speaks up against them will be targeted. So it's you can see there's a two-tier judiciary policing system, but also a two-tier cultural problem that we've got now as well in society.
I think the reason for one of the reasons, and I may be wrong here, but I strongly I'm inclined to think I'm actually right on this one, and that is the difference between speaking up against any other ideology. For instance, if you was to speak about Sikhism in the same manner, let's say we had a problem with Sikhs. We don't, but let's assume that we did for a moment. The problem is when you go to their book, the Guru Granth Sahib, it doesn't tell you to slay the idolaters. It doesn't tell you to kill critics. You know, if you insulted Guru Nanak or one of the other many gurus that they have, you're not like even though they carry the sword as part of their religious practice, they're not likely to use it against you, not in the slightest. However, with Islam, if you do say something about Islam, or if you try and inhibit Islam, blood has to be spilt. And I think in the last show that we had on this, we had the little girl that suffered from autism that scuffed the Quran, and the police escorted her to the local mosque, and she was forced to apologize to the imam of the local mosque. You had the Michaela school and the fiasco of one girl wanting to have a prayer room so that she can have prayer, even though when you sign up for that school, you sign up knowing that it's fully quality and that religion will not be something that's introduced into that secular environment. You're finding this time and again with one ideology. The only difference between this ideology and all the others when you attack it is with this one, you have to be careful because blood will be spilt at some point. Yeah, and that's where I think that's where the problem is, because you do have that very real threat. Manchester bombing is a reality. The stabbings that took place, was it we have various stabbings involving Muslims. We've had cars being driven on Westminster, knocking pedestrians over. We've had situations in Europe. Was it Theo Van Gogh that did Fitna, the little short movie for about 15 minutes? He got stabbed to death. You had the school teacher in France that got beheaded. You had Lee Rigby beheaded. The list goes on.
You have politicians chased out of parliament and living in hiding, UK politicians, because of Islam, and this doesn't get discussed.
We've had MPs leave political parties in fear of Islam.
What about the Somalian, that was it David Amos that got stabbed by a Somalian at his surgery?
Yeah. So it's out of control.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I mean, it's just shocking. Thunderous, I prepared this list of questions for discussion to have with Roan. I just thought we can maybe go through some of these, and then there's only 7 of them, I think it is. But let's look at the current situation as things with Labour, because Labour is obviously these are socialists, and they clearly are not patriotic, and they clearly have an out-group preference. They've gone out of their way to demonize the Labour. I mean, the Labour supporters, the working class people. They've gone out of their way to demonize them as the far right, as effectively Nazis for wanting to preserve their culture, to preserve their language, to preserve their country as it is. But also, I mean, they're even starting to remove benefits from them, like the heating allowance for the elderly,
Mm.
and that money has to go to desperately needed green projects in, I don't know, Algeria or in Ghana, in Cote d'Ivoire, odd things like that. And they're sending money. In fact, they're sending money to countries that are richer than the UK for industrial projects, which is very, very odd. And I mean, they're turning on their own people. Your thoughts on that? So how has the political shift to a Labour government under Keir Starmer or Keir Stalin affected free speech? Because it seems to be very much under attack.
I think you've only got to look at the events since the stabbing of Southport. You don't even need to go beyond that. And the reaction, the way that they've implemented a procedure to allow criminals, convicted criminals of crimes, real crimes, they've allowed them to be released from prison to jubilant champagne applause. Okay. Yet you're imprisoning people for shouting at dogs, people moving wheelie bins, people saying silly things on YouTube, which are just hurty words. And I forget the guy that did 2 years. You mentioned him a moment ago, Rowan. I forget what he did. But you're actually making way for these people to go into prison. I think you don't need to go beyond that. Within a month of getting into power.
Yeah, in South Africa, when the ANC came to power, and the ANC is a hardcore 80s revolutionary communist group, they freed the prisoners. They flooded the country with prisoners who were in prison for heinous crimes, violent people. And this South Africa now has the largest and the biggest industry in the country, I believe, is the security industry. It has been the fastest growing industry for a long time, and South Africa has become incredibly unsafe. And this is what the result is. And again, those demographics you mentioned earlier on, the statistics, the police do not collect statistics on, or at least they do not, well, often they don't collect them, but also they don't allow you to discuss or they don't distribute the statistics on who is doing what on the crimes. You know that the rape gangs are 95% Muslim males, generally Pakistani. If you go across Europe, you'll find that the Afghani males are the ones who have the highest prevalence, the highest likelihood of being rapists. And then you've got Sudanese men who fit in certain categories. So yeah, because this will turn people against it, and therefore because this will incite violence, they are not releasing their stats because the police don't want to incite violence against their plan. This will turn people against the government. Yeah. So there was one instance that I thought was really insane. Where someone was arrested and jailed for some of the thing, but they're terrorizing people. They're publishing it online so that I think they're there to intimidate. It's the chilling effect. They're there to intimidate others into silence. And if you are not careful how you phrase things and how you say them, you can end up in jail. And I mean, they're visiting people who've made no crimes, committed no crimes, like for non-crime hate incidents. They're now bringing that back, even though that was struck down in the High Court. And now they're bringing that back, and they want to strengthen that so that you can be cited for a non-crime hate incident that can go on your record and can affect your ability to have a job, because it can be looked up for a job interview, for a loan, for any kind of opening a business, running for parliament. This can effectively bar you from any kind of social life. Your thoughts?
I think with what you're saying there, Lloyd, I will respond when we get to the questions that you've got further down the screen, when we get to the point of Christian perspective, and I'll probably explain my response there.
Right. So Rowan, the rallies that you're organizing, I mean, how did the last rally work? Because I watched that rally. I watched almost all of it from the beginning until the point where he streamed the movie, because it was like a long movie, and then I stepped out because I had some things to do and I left, so I wasn't, but I watched all of it until that point, and I thought it was very good, very patriotic. What's been the effect, and tell us about the next one as well?
Okay, so with the rallies, the whole objective is to unite the kingdom. That's the actual slogan, is uniting the kingdom. And what we're trying to do is get all those who get basically fed up of this two-tier judiciary and establishment that we have, and those who feel like they're not being listened to, that their voices are not being heard, and they're coming together. We're celebrating the Christian values, the Christian culture that we have, the freedoms that come out of the Judeo-Christian principles. and we're celebrating our identity in a way where the establishment also they can't do anything about it. So it's a peaceful protest, what we're doing, but we're also highlighting the problems that we've got in society. So as you said, the film that Tommy displayed, each demonstration that we've had, there has been some kind of documentary or film, that a short film that Tommy or his production team have made, and these highlight some of the problems that we've got in the system. The last one was Silence, which was based on the judiciary, the way how they are two-tier, and everything that Tommy has been saying, what you see in Twitter posts or what you'll see on YouTube clips, has been backed up with these documentaries. The one that he'd previously done, he was too scared. For 3 years, he didn't let it go because a judge warned him that if he did, he would be in trouble. He'd get arrested, remanded, and thrown into prison for. So he was quiet, but he felt like he was let down. He was letting us down, the British public. So he then brought it out for everyone to see. And I don't know if you're aware, but the very next day, that's when Tommy was arrested under terrorism charges, and he was interrogated under the Terrorism Act. So yeah, that's what's been going on there. But we've also, there's a lot of a Christian vibe around these as well. Christianity has been a focal point of the movement as well. And a lot of people that are attending are not Christian. However, they celebrate the values that and freedoms that they have gained from Christianity, even though they're not Christian themselves. So we're getting people now call themselves culturally Christian, which for me is fair enough.
Even Richard Dawkins is doing that.
Yep, and they're beginning to speak up against what we're seeing as the anti-Christian rhetoric, what we're getting from the Islamists. But they're also highlighting the attacks on Judaism, on the Jews, of what Islam are very keen to display whenever and wherever they can.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is so a lot of people are in defense of Christianity on that one, even though they're not Christians.
I've actually noticed in social media a resurgence of discussion around Christianity. For instance, Lawrence Fox is now more and more openly talking about Christianity, being Christian, Christian values. Tommy Robinson is actually starting to raise it more and more, and you're finding that those around him are also starting to raise this. So actually, it's actually leading to some sort of people to go, you know what, the loss of Christianity has led to the resurgence or the rise of Islam. So we need to balance that out. We need to bring Christianity back, and
can I just respond to that?
Please do.
Yeah, I think this is something you and I have discussed several years ago when we were on the Gin and Tonic show, particularly with Darwin Atheists, how they parasitically glean from the Christian moral code into their own subjective life view, because atheism is amoral. It's no more immoral than the flipping chemicals they claim to have evolved from. However, when you look at the growth of atheism, and you and I have discussed this many years ago, where if you took the First World War as your starting point, moved forward, because by then the books had been written, the men were alive, and the influence of Darwinian atheism in the education and political and religious system, you found that what served as a bulwark against influences that were contrary to nature, as it were, as those were slowly eroding, people started to behave in a very fleshly kind of way. We're now living in a society now where one woman can have 2 or 3 children by 2 or 3 different men. One man can have 2 or 3 children by 2 or 3 different women. You're finding youth attackers going around stabbing people. The common denominator for that phenomenon, as an example, you'll find is a continued pattern response of they don't have a father at home. That's why they've got no discipline. This is what the cause is. And you find that the primary factor in all of this, you removed Christianity from society. This is what's led to all of this. This has been the cause.
Yes.
So when you're finding people going back to, say, Christian values, they're beginning to think, hang on a minute. You had it right all along. The Christians were right. One man should marry one woman. One man should stay with that one woman. We shouldn't have fathers.
How do you know what a man is? Because I find it crazy. There's a debate about what is a woman, but somehow they have no idea what a woman is, but they know exactly what a man is, and that a man can be a woman. How is that remotely logical? That you can know precisely with 100% certainty that's a man, he can be a woman, We don't know what a woman is.
But Lloyd, if you remember, several years ago, we did a show on Thaddeus' channel. It was a New Year Eve one, and we were talking about the influence of atheism. And we were talking the byproduct of this has been this removal of objective moral values that are predicated on our theistic doctrines. Okay.
Yeah.
And this subjective feelings has taken over society. But now we've got to the point where we're now within vacuum. And Islam seems to be coming in and filling that vacuum for some people, or is appearing to give the impression of filling that vacuum, which is why you've had people like Ali Dawa or Muhammad Hijab saying, well, one of the reasons that Islam is growing because we stand up to all of these things. It's a manly religion. It's a belligerent religion. You know, we're ready to fight all these things for our values because let's face it, the sin narrative is over and done with. You dealt it a death blow, Lloyd, with all the material that you've been putting out. The archaeology has destroyed Islam. Cartography has destroyed Islam. The standard Islamic narrative of the Quran only being one Quran in the Arabic language, that has been destroyed now. So they've got, and the science that is supposed to be in the Quran, all destroyed. So they've only got one argument left now, and that's the masculinity of Quran, to be able to stand up to all these things that have been infiltrated into society via atheism. So this is why people go back to Christianity.
Agreed. I'm just gonna briefly demonetize my video right now by showing people something. This is Islamic history, okay? Based on your comment, Thunderous, that we don't play that in Islam. Well, have a look here. This is historical. This is from the Ottoman Empire, lining up to use a BOY from Sawaqub al-Manaqib. And trust me, that's not Hindi. That's definitely some Arabic stuff. This is from the Topkapi Palace Museum. This is men lining up to use a boy. I think we can all see what that is. Let's have a look here.
But there's verses in the Quran describing boys of pearls in Jannah when they go to heaven, isn't it?
But about the Bachabazi that go on in Afghanistan, I had it on my previous YouTube channel before it got deleted, and it was the video that I posted that got the most amount of views.
Yes,
was the Bachabazi.
This is Islamic practice. This kind of debauchery is very much part and parcel of the history of Islam, and something that they don't want us to know about. But I'll leave that there for now.
Well, it happens even today, but you'll see it more in the Islamic countries. You wouldn't see it. You wouldn't see it a lot in the West, however, but it does still happen.
But it's on the way, right? It's definitely growing. I have a question to you, Ron. What has been the response of the last rally that was so successful? I mean, what has been the positive outcome, and where do you think that will lead to?
Okay, so well, I would say at first Tommy Robinson was, I wouldn't say hated, but he wasn't very much in the main public interest. He wasn't highly celebrated by everyone, let's put it that way. However, there's been a massive turning point where the things that Tommy has predicted and said years ago, they have aged well. And people are starting to wake up to the things that Tommy has said and about Islam. So many people have called Tommy a racist or an Islamophobe in the past.
Yeah.
Yet they have come to realize that actually Tommy has a lot of people who are of color that are his friends and family. And we're seeing people of all races, from all cultures and all religions, turning up to these rallies, celebrating our country, our nation as a whole. But also the call that Tommy put out about Islam, the worries that we're going to have from it, and the threat of Britain becoming an Islamic state is ever increasing, becoming real. People are starting to realize that now. And that is the biggest fear that personally I have, is that that's the way we're heading if we don't do anything. Now, I also believe that with the British people, there's a level of tolerance that once you go past that certain line, a line is drawn and then the British people will react. And they're a hard bunch to try and destroy, if you like, but people are waking up. They're seeing what's going on now, and thanks to people like Elon Musk who have the Twitter platform, we can see all the time on there the fruits of Islam and its what it does to the country. But for numbers wise, when Tommy started out at first, there was we're talking football fans mainly, some people from the far right that he didn't welcome and that he called out. But now we're seeing the public come out, the majority of the people. So I would say June the 1st, the rally that we celebrated this year, was about, I would say there was about 30 to 40,000 people there at Parliament Square. Yet a month later, on the 27th of July in Trafalgar Square, we've seen, I would say, anything up to 100,000 people, maybe more, with 1 million people watching. And from that, people now, I think, well, the numbers for his documentary Silence has gone up to plus 50 million views.
Yeah, 50 million views. Yeah, I think so.
And he's also been invited on with figures like Jordan Peterson, and other people who are, I'd say, higher up are beginning to speak about him now. I wouldn't say much. So we've got over here, because of the way mainstream media is, we've got two platforms that would class themselves as centre right or on the right side of politics. GB News, Talk TV. They're not so much happy, I would say, about talking about Tommy, but they're beginning to talk about the rallies now. And what I'm beginning to feel that now is the next rally that we've got planned in October, at the end of October, we're going to see probably, I'd say, anything between 150 to maybe 200,000 people coming out for that one, I believe, personally.
I hope so. I hope. Yeah, Thunderous?
Yeah, I was just going to say something that Rowan said there. What I wanted to comment on about the racism side of it, where people think that if you're attacking Islam, it's racist. It's not. It's ethnocentrism, and I think there's some people confuse the difference between racism and ethnocentrism, where you can be critical of a religion or a cultural practice, but for some reason it's now easier to brand somebody as a racist just being critical, not on their skin color, but purely because you don't like the ideology or you don't particularly, for instance, if you're against, say, arranged marriages, which are predominantly Indian and Middle Eastern, if you're against that, rather than say you're an ethnocentrist, which is what it really is, they'll just now brand you as a racist as a matter of convenience. And it's lazy because it stifles discussion.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, it's crazy, though, that if you're a brown person from pick the country, you can be proud of your food, you can be proud of your family, your heritage, your flag, your national dress. But if you're a white person from the West and you go, hold on, but I like my country being white. I like our national dress. I like our national food. I don't want to see any of this being diluted or changed. You're branded a racist. So you can praise any culture that's not Western and not white, and you can only demonize any culture that is. And someone, James Vickers, who's asking questions that sometimes they're questions that highlight certain topics that may potentially play devil's advocate, and then you have questions that are actually attacks that undermine, that actually introduce doubt, that are designed to cause damage to an argument, that are designed to preempt an argument and actually create a negative seed of doubt. And James, I think that's where your arguments land. But sorry, I almost lost my thought, my train of thought there. He mentioned earlier BLM, not causing lots of damage, but if you look at patriotism in the UK 20 years ago, there was a very high degree of patriotism in the UK across all of the ethnicities, right? They were all British. They all rallied around the flag, the Queen, the language, the culture.
It was celebrated as well.
Yes, patriotism has now fallen significantly. BLM has had a role in that. So they may not have burned down Buckingham Palace or your house, right, or the tube station next to you, stopping you from getting to work easily, but they have destroyed the fabric of British culture. Now, if you are ashamed of your culture, if you are too ashamed of supporting your culture, if you think your culture is evil and toxic and negative, and your family has had toxic, negative ideas, your culture has inherited ugly, disgusting, racist ideas, and that your culture should really just commit suicide and let the brown people take over, then I would say BLM has actually been very effective at causing massive damage, and this needs to be reversed. Not all damage is necessarily economic. So your thoughts, Christian? Rowan, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, so well, BLM for one, Tommy's done a very, very good job of exposing them, but there's also other organizations like BLM, such as Hope Not Hate, run by one and only Nick Lowles, who is completely against Tommy and completely against patriotism. As you should check him out. He's terrible. So Tommy he's been going after these movements and exposing exactly what they do. Some of them have been really, really bad. Some of the work that he's collected has been very refreshing. Let's say, for instance, I think it was Hope Not Hate, where there was one person where they actually asking a female reporter that was undercover for Tommy, asking her if she would basically be like an alleged rape victim or something like that. And they were also, they make these evil little plans to try and set people up. And the problem is the establishment, they back organizations like these, especially the Labour Party, Keir Starmer. They're doing quite a lot of work with these organizations to try and, you know, scrutinize, but also shut down and silence people like Tommy Robinson, figures that represent patriotism of the UK and people who represent the majority of the UK. It's not just patriotism that's under attack here. It's the majority of it's the voice of the majority here in the UK. Nobody is interested in what the mainstream media has to say anymore. The things that they're covering have got nothing to do with what's actually happening in reality. And people are beginning to see that now. They're beginning to wake up to it. So we're seeing a reformation in society now, where people are starting to go against what we're used to doing, which is having faith in the establishment, having faith in our police, having faith in the mainstream media that they're telling the truth when they're really not. So
but people are rediscovering their national identity. Thunderous, a question for you. I mean, did you think that the Brits are rediscovering patriotism and that this is going to have a groundswell effect?
I don't know if patriotism is going to be the galvanizing flag that people will go behind, or forgive me, or identify with. I think the past 30 odd years has shown, not just necessarily with Islam, but with by extension, other things that have taken place in the world. I don't think the COVID narrative helped.
Yeah, true. That destroyed damage. That damaged people's view of the state. Yeah.
Yeah. So the COVID narrative, along with the vaccine narrative, both of them are severely questionable. I'm not going to make any comment of where I am on that. You can look at, say, the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War. You can look at the way 2000, the way that the banking industry was bailed out by the government using taxpayers' money. I think there have been a lot of things that have taken place within government and the symbiotic relationship that they have with the media or mainstream media, which has published things to the benefit of government. Okay, where people, once upon a time, things were branded conspiracy theories, but now it's got to the point of what is considered a conspiracy theory today. In about 2 years' time, we'll be talking about as a reality that's taking place in the world scene, and I think people have got wise to that. You know,
yeah, so I mean, pretty much everything that Alex Jones has said has come true. So.
I don't believe Alex Jones. I don't believe David Icke, Alex Jones, Russell Brand.
I
think
there's a few things he said that is right.
Yeah, but I think
David Icke is a BS artist, and Alex Jones does exaggerate and say some crazy things, but he was right about the frogs turning gay and some other crazy things. I mean, oddly enough,
I think you got to be careful with these kind. I call them Pied Pipers that appeal to a particular demographic. That they can tell you 5 lies, but they can tell you 5
sensationalists.
Well. Yeah. So one has to be careful with them. You can listen to them. There's something worth gleaning from them. But for me, I think people should use those sort of like channels as a mental process, as a mental exercise to work out why you accept something they've got to say and why you disagree with something to say. Because the one thing that we don't have now, and maybe Rowan will remember this, in the 80s and in the 90s, certainly the early 90s, in England, we had a lot of debate programs. And in fact, humor was predicated on policy, not person. So what you had to do with, and I've tried to do this with my channel now, I've moved away from putting anything Islamic on there, but is go back to the roots of thinking. And that is to say, when you listen to a debate program in this country, you had to listen to both sides of the argument and then form a mental process to why you agreed with one person and why you disagreed with another person. And it was actually good for the brain. we've now, since the mid 90s to where we are now, you just do not see the debate discussion anymore. And if there is a debate discussion to be had, it tends to be rigged in favor of the narrative that the government wants to project. So you have, for instance, if you listen to, say, a pathetic argument from a Darwinian evolutionist to, say, somebody that promotes intelligent design, you'll have a very articulate and educated evolutionist, but then somebody trying to defend intelligent design will probably be a pastor from Africa that can't speak English properly. So, the debate is rigged against the truth, as it were.
And
so
we're seeing a lot of that with the BBC as well. They'll deliberately get people who are on the left to represent the right, and then they'll pretend to have a debate on their show. And yeah, it's terrible.
Exactly. So it's all rigged, and when you consider live TV now as it is, with, say, like a Fantasy Love Island or Celebrity Come Dance with Me, or whatever these programs are, they're designed, in my estimation, to make people stupid and not quick think. If you think back to Pink Floyd, The Wall, "Hey teacher, leave those kids alone. We don't need no thought control." That's where we are now. You know, whether they knew what they were singing about in the early 80s when they released that song or not, I don't know. But let's have a look at the lyrics. We don't need no thought control. We are exactly at that moment in time with the media and government where we are having thought control. And the natural reaction is, and you'll notice the majority of the reactions coming from a particular age group that have seen the transition. They've seen the change from the kind of country that this country was to the way that the country is now, and they don't like what they're seeing.
No. And another thing I was going to say as well, it's not just like the news or any debate shows that we used to have. It's modern day television. They're using TV programs that certainly I used to be heavily invested in when I was younger. And what they'll do is they'll get minorities or people from minority groups or communities, and there's always an attack on them. There's always some kind of bullying going on by the nasty far right people, the white, and they're always white as well. These nasty people, these villains, they're always white now, and they're always attacking these communities. That's all you've seen in programs. For me, national television was shut down a very long time ago.
Yeah,
I'll be very lucky if I watch a series or a film, and I'll definitely check the trailers before I do watch it, because I can't do with any of this left liberal production type themes that they're going for it nowadays. It's all politically activated as well. It's a nightmare.
Right. Yeah. A couple of thoughts. Someone was mentioning, that many countries are obviously starting to push back now. You see Holland starting to push back. They want to opt out of this UN scheme to resettle migrants. I mean, which is, well past due. You see issues in Spain. People are starting to push back. You see issues in Germany. You see France, in Poland, of course. But I mean, Poland obviously has been very, very harsh against African migrant immigration. On the positive side. On the negative side, I'm an African migrant. So, as I was mentioning to the guys before, I'm not going to get into a long song and dance, but let's just say that the Polish government doesn't make a strong distinction between an illegal African migrant and someone who arrived there legally, like myself. So even as a permanent resident, what that means is they won't just arbitrarily throw me out because they feel like it. Other than that, I'm a tourist who really should get on a plane and leave. Okay, so really that's pretty much where I stand here in Poland, and that's based on hard experience. It's not a picnic here. I am the wrong shade of Polish, and believe me, they let me know this. The government, the financial institutions, they are happy to inform me at every possible opportunity that maybe you should just F off. So I'll leave it at that. But
just before we go on to this, if I may, Lloyd, I'd like to ask Rowan a question, because he might know more about this than I do. Okay, Rowan, do you remember when the Manchester footage was released of the policeman being assaulted by two Muslim guys at the airport? Now, first of all, there was a short edited version that was released. There's not been any comments as to who released that, but have you noticed that there's a police investigation going into who released the unedited version that shows that the police were actually the victims, not the culprits? Do you know anything more on that?
No, I don't. I know the investigation's still ongoing. There is rumours that it was a police officer themselves, but it's like you say, the whole situation of it all is absolutely hilarious, because instead of, like the people at the protests who took part in the protests, they were slammed. Well, if you were British, you were slammed, and they've been dealt with. They've been put in prison. But these Muslims involved in this attack, they're still on bail. And instead of focusing on putting them away, what the police have actually done is they're trying to chase down the people who released the footage of the truth of, because at first you had the video of the police officer kicking one of the suspects in the head.
Yeah.
And then the very next day, there was more footage released of what happened before that, where there was a female officer punched in the face. She had a broken nose, and there was an altercation going on for a very long time.
5 armed police officers attacked. No charges were pressed. They're still free.
And this was at an airport. So, I mean, think about it, going back to 9/11, and especially with the dates, the date this took place, you'd think that they are going to take any kind of crime at an airport very, very seriously. So I wouldn't say it was punishment, but their reaction was just in my viewpoint. However, but they haven't been dealt with, and instead of sorting these the prosecutions out for these Muslims that took part in this assault on the police force, they've gone after the guys that have released footage, and the actual barristers in charge of the defense for these Muslims, they have made a public address. I don't know if you've seen the footage, Thunderous. But basically describing those who released the footage as Islamophobic and racist, and saying that there's been a lot of hit back on the Muslim family because of that footage. Well, so there should be. They shouldn't be acting in that way in anywhere in public or anywhere in Britain or any Western country as it is. They shouldn't have acted like that.
And I think what you just said there, Rowan, about it being at an airport as well, when you consider the sensitivity, and also they carry guns, you wouldn't be able to tell in that state of mind because one of them, there was one piece of footage I saw where one of the Muslims was on the back of another policeman and digging him with some real good body shots with his left. And I thought, well, you know what in that kind of mindset, how would you know or not know if he was going to reach for the weapon of the policeman and use the weapon against the policeman? What kind of response are you expecting? And then, as you say, there was a press conference where they totally took this as an opportunity, a PR opportunity, to blame the footage as a deliberate way of maligning the Muslim community, and in particular this family, when in reality, when you look at the footage, objectively speaking, at an airport, probably, and when you consider the Mariana Grande Manchester bombing, when you consider 9/11, when you consider other situations that have taken place in the public with Muslims, what are you to expect the police to do when they're there?
Think there were 3 concerts with Taylor Swift that were cancelled because of Islamic threats, which means that this is having a massive impact on cultural events, on cultural cohesion, cultural plan. I mean, you can't plan things. You can't celebrate your culture. You can't get together as a group. This is creating a low trust society. And those guys who were planning to attack those concerts were planning to have mass casualty events. They wanted to literally kill thousands of people. And the worst thing is that if they had succeeded in killing thousands of people, imagine the backlash against peaceful Muslims.
Yeah. And they also...
That was sarcasm, by the way, before people go. I was
going to say that there's, in my estimation, as an ex-Muslim that's come from the Muslim community, the reality is the violent Muslims are the snake in the grass. The peaceful, or what you consider peaceful Muslims, are the grass hiding the snake. There is no such thing as a peaceful Muslim. They close ranks tighter than the paedophile ring. When
they're part of a cult. It's a tribe. I mean, it's tribal. You protect the tribe ahead of all else. And I mean, people have been going, "Oh my God, look at the backlash against peaceful Muslims." Never mind the people who are murdered, but look at the backlash against those peaceful Muslims who did nothing.
Where were these peaceful Muslims? Where was the peaceful Muslims when the Barcelona trains got bombed? Where was the peaceful Muslims when the Lee Rigby got his head chopped off? Where was the peaceful Muslims when the French school teacher got his head chopped off? Where was the peaceful Muslims with the girl suffering from autism, scuffing the Quran. Where was the peaceful Muslims protesting about, we want this school to stay the way it is, we don't need to have the Muslims interfering with reference to prayer meetings or prayer opportunities?
Very relevant. The
Where-
peaceful
exactly,
Muslims
where
are an
were the-
irrelevant, non-existent, mythical community.
I
Yeah,
wanted
exactly
to I want to touch on that because there, I think what some people like myself as a patriot, what they mean with the peaceful Muslims is, like, for myself, I've come across 2 or 3 Muslims in my time that I would say are, they're more British cultural than they are Muslim. So they've grew up in a like a Muslim household, but they don't take the faith that seriously. They don't always attend Friday prayer. They don't observe 5 prayers a day and stuff like that. So to me, what I would say is, well, they're not really Muslim then, are they?
No.
But then you've got what's his name, Zia Yusuf, who was a very heavy invested person in Reform UK. I think he still is part of a Reform UK. I can't remember what position he has, but he's high up in Reform UK, the political party, and he gave one of the most patriotic, most alarming speeches, if you like, at the NEC Arena in Birmingham for Reform UK. And it's probably one of the best speeches I've ever heard on behalf of British culture and British history. It was amazing. And we later found out on YouTube that he was actually a Muslim. So it was a bit of a shock to find out he was. But then I asked myself the question, well, hang on a minute. Okay, this peaceful Muslim argument, what do they have in common with the peaceful ones and the ones that don't? Well, you've got the Quran, you've got Allah, you've got Muhammad. Now, believing in the Quran, believing in Allah and Muhammad, obviously you're going to believe in the prophecies, and the prophecies that they mainly focus on now is that the whole world will be governed by Islam and Sharia law. So is there really peaceful Muslims? Because eventually they're going to have to get involved at some point or some way or another in this whole takeover, aren't they? In this conflict.
I mean,
you raise a very interesting point there, Petra, because I will go to Revelation 18 verse 4, where it says, "Get out from her if you don't want to share in her sins." Now, we can argue what Babylon the Great is as far as prophecy and eschatology is concerned. Let's not concentrate on Babylon. Let's just concentrate on the principle where God turns around and says, "Get out from her," in Revelation 18 verse 4, "Get out from her if you don't want to share in her sins." Now, whatever Babylon is, it is not a person, it is an ideology, it is a belief, or whatever it is. He's talking to individuals if you identify with it. And the principle there is communal or community responsibility. It is one of the arguments I have against Islam. The moment you turn around and say that you're a Muslim, you're basically, by implication, stating, I have no problem with a 52-year-old man marrying a 6-year-old girl.
Yeah.
I have no problem with a 54-year-old man putting his penis inside a 9-year-old girl's vagina. That is what you are saying the moment you identify as a Muslim. So when you're talking about the violence and the war and the aggression, when the principle of communal or community responsibility, you have no choice. You've just identified yourself as somebody that supports the ideology, no matter what you think it does or doesn't have.
If you adopt the name Muslim, then you by default say that you accept the Sharia, that you follow it. The example of Muhammad, the Sunnah. You follow the Sunnah, you follow the Sharia. If you do not adopt those, then you are an apostate. Then you are outside of the religion.
That's what I was trying to say. And unfortunately, you've got some Muslims in the West now, because of Western culture, that believe in a different Islam than what truly exists. And it's going
I think many of these are propagandists, witting or unwitting, but they are trying to create a false front. They're trying to deceive. And that they are being used, or they are deliberately doing so. Just like Quran onlyism is often just a way to escape the embarrassment in the Sunnah, the embarrassment in the Sharia.
But there's a lot of fear as well, Lloyd, because you're going to get Muslims as well that believe if they was to denounce Islam, they would lose their family, they would lose their community, they would lose everything.
There are repercussions.
They identify as Muslim just to keep everyone quiet and just to keep their, their safety net, as you like.
And I mean, we do need to remind the audience that it is a simple fact of the Sharia. Muslims are obligated to lie, and they're allowed to lie to protect themselves from embarrassment, to save themselves from shame or emotional pressure. They are allowed to lie. In fact, they're obligated to lie to protect Islam. They're obligated to lie to present the most positive face of Islam, because Islam cannot be shown to be less than perfect. Muhammad cannot be shown to be less than perfect. And also, I mean, in the UK now, you have to be so careful and precise and speak like a lawyer, which is, I think, the common issue now. I watch a lot of UK social media influencers. I watch a lot of the videos, and there's a guy called, for instance, the Black Belt Barrister, and sometimes he speaks in such a woolly, unclear, broad, vague set of terms, and he says, these are the 5 things that you need to do not to be arrested by the police for your social media posts. And he'll say, well, you have to be very nice, and you have to be careful, and also, really, you should just take care with the things that you do. And you're like, like, okay, can you be more specific, right? Because everyone is so scared of saying something that's going to be misconstrued. And of course, the police, as someone mentioned in the chat earlier, when you speak out of turn, or when you speak without thinking, or when you aren't as literate as you'd like to be, or aren't as articulate as you'd like to be, that is going to be used against you, right? But I mean, to go back to my statement earlier of the mythical, peaceful Muslim community, if you're a Muslim, then you support jihad, very bluntly. If you are an apostate, then you're out of that system and you no longer abide by those rules. And you're not a peaceful Muslim. You are now an apostate. You may be an atheist. You might become a Buddhist. You might become a Christian. And then also the quote unquote supposedly peaceful Muslim community are simply following the doctrine of rukhsa, as opposed to the violent, direct doctrine of azima, the strict doctrine that the jihadis, the Wahhabis and others are following. The ISIS people, the Ali Dawas and so on, the Muhammadi Jabs, they're following Azima, the rest are following Rukhsa. But they could switch at any moment. And given the right circumstances, they are forced to make that switch. They're obligated to. But also the peaceful community that everyone uses as this sort of propaganda term is ineffective, completely ineffective. What genuine influence do they have? What connection do they have to the sources? They are an ineffective, irrelevant, useless community, because you see the rise of Sharia courts that goes on. You see greater and greater incidents of rape. This pandemic of rape in the UK by Muslim men has not stopped. You see more and more honor killings. You see more and more, the Islamic community forcing its way into politics and asserting itself. That peaceful community is worth nothing. And everyone goes, well, don't look at the bad. Because it's like me saying, this would be as bad as me saying, well, don't focus on Hitler's negatives. He was a good family man, and he loved dogs, and he was a vegetarian. Focus on the good things. Right.
I think what Rowan was saying there as well about those who are probably trapped inside the bubble of Islam, but there is a severe repercussion, ostracism, and by the command of Muhammad himself, if a man leaves his religion, kill him.
Yeah.
So if you're not prepared to kill, then ostracism is a very real thing. And the only reason why killing is probably not taking place in England that we know of anyway is probably because we're in England and there are severe repercussions. In Pakistan, for instance, if you leave the ideology, you can say anything, and then that you'll get mob violence turned on that person. But I will say, as someone that was brought up in the Pakistani community in the area I'm living in, that ostracism doesn't necessarily exist is not unique to Islam. It also prevails with Sikhs and Hindus, that if you leave the Hindu religion or community or the Sikh religion or community, you're quite easily ostracized there. The only difference really is with Islam, they will cut your throat for it.
Yeah,
that's
all.
Yeah. Nicodemus just said something very interesting. I know nice Muslims, so you must tolerate vile oppression, tyranny, and extreme hypocrisy. I'm open-minded, so parrot mass media rhetoric with me or else. And there's a fair point. I mean, look, obviously on this channel, I mean, we tend to use a fair degree of sarcasm. I think everyone knows. I get comments saying, Lloyd, I can't tell whether you're joking, being sarcastic, or being
got a straight face, that's why, all the time.
Deadpan.
Yeah, but I thought dry humor was, being droll was the British way.
Yeah, it is the British way. It's just more obvious when others do it, I think, Lloyd. I think you're always playing your poker face, aren't you, when you're on live?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, should we speak about this Islamophobia thing? Because, I mean, Sharia law and blasphemy law has now made its way into UK law by the look of things. And it's now coming down hard. You can criticize the Sikhs. You can criticize the Hindus. You can criticize those nasty, goose-stepping, white, middle-class Brits. But, oh my God, don't you criticize those Muslims who beat up policemen in an airport. That's just racist. Shall we have a
Yeah.
look at that, Thunderous? And
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
Muslim
there's a massive rise of, let's say, well, the relationship between the establishment and the Muslim community is, well, it's forever growing and it's blossoming. I've seen videos recently of police celebrating the Pakistani Independence Day in London,
What?
like it was their day.
Do they celebrate Christmas and Easter? Do they paint Father Christmas on their cars and Christmas
Well,
trees and Easter eggs?
They don't even call it Christmas.
Yeah, London City, our capital, is actually run our mayor Sadiq Khan. He's a Muslim himself, so, and he's very
Former
pally.
jihadi terrorist defense lawyer.
Yeah, living in the pockets of Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer has already pledged to donate millions of pounds, multi-millions of pounds to the Muslim community so that they can build new mosques, extend new mosques. There's also talks of the azan, the call to prayer, to be allowed to be played out on the streets for the Muslim community as well. But also, as you were saying, the blasphemy laws. They're talking now also about tightening the legislation or creating a new definition of the term Islamophobia. They haven't got one yet. Reform UK. Well,
this is insidious. So what they have here is insidious.
Lee Anderson, who is a member of Parliament now for Reform UK, he challenged what's her name now? I can't remember her name. The Deputy Prime Minister, anyway, and basically asked her what the new definition of Islamophobia may be, and she didn't have one. She couldn't say. She just said that in the next weeks. That
it was gibberish. Her response was just gibberish.
Yeah, she
it's like, I grew up as a middle class child with a good family where there were truckers and people who loved their lawns, and we all learned to get along. Did she start with one of those political speeches?
Her response was no different. I think her response sounded like it came from the same angel that gave Muhammad the Quran. The response was just as much gibberish.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so we're going to see, I believe, laws that will make sure we can't criticize Muhammad. I think that's going to be one where if you mention anything or speak against Muhammad in a defamatory
defamation,
bad way, then you could face prosecution, which is going to scare absolutely anyone and everyone into not wanting to criticize Islam or talk about anything to do with Islam.
One of the greatest minds that come out of the UK is Douglas Murray. I mean, the man is prophetic. The man is prophetic. Brilliant. He is articulate. He's very careful and reasoned in his arguments. He's brilliant. And I mean, don't you think that if we're not allowed to discuss these issues openly, that, I mean, this pushes you towards violence, and this might be their strategy to make you do things that they can use to demonize you and arrest you and crack down hard. But then again, if the police are literally running away from Muslim rioters and other foreign rioters, but they're quite happy to suit up and get into the riot gear and bring out the tanks for Brits who are
Can I
unhappy.
say something on that? May I say something on that? And I think Patriot might agree with me on this one, or I'd like to certainly get his response. I'm 56 years old. When I used to get in trouble when I was in the 80s and the 90s, I've been arrested a couple of times for violence. And when I got arrested by a policeman or policemen that were probably ex-squaddies. Now the police are recruiting from this woke DEI agenda spectrum. Mm-hmm. So you're not getting people who are mentally or emotionally or physically equipped to deal with certain situations. I don't think they can even deal with a puncher on a car. They come straight out of university or college. They've gone into the police force for maybe the role that they've got, maybe the role or the power that they're going to get, or maybe because it's just a perfunctory role they can do for 20 years and get pensioned off at the end of it. They're not recruiting men that want to do disciplined men, strong men, trained men. And also, if you can add, some of them, because they've come from the army, would be patriotic men as well. So they'll have a heightened sense of what is right and what is wrong. I bring this up as an example because when there was the soldiers coming back from Iraq and the Muslims were in Luton spitting on the soldiers as they were walking by. I can't imagine if you had a policemen there that were ex-squaddies that they would actually tolerate that, watching their brothers being spat on. I don't think for a moment they would. But the police officers that you've got now, which are from this DEI agenda of coming from minorities, you've got a section of people that are clearly going to be controlled people. Yeah. Okay, they're not mentally equipped for the role. They're certainly not physically equipped to do the role. So when you've got, as Lloyd brought out the point where they're running away from Muslims, that does not surprise me in the slightest, considering where did you recruit these people from and what did you expect them to do? Stand and fight. These people, they're only interested in arresting somebody when somebody uses the wrong gender pronoun, or if they're outside an abortion clinic praying inside their head. That's the only role that they're suited for now, not arrested. Why do you think all this? The police are a joke now. Let's have it right. The police don't have that fear factor that they once had, that I grew up with, and probably you grew up with, and certainly you grew up with, Lloyd. People don't have that fear factor anymore. Look at them now. Who the heck are they capable of arresting? They're there to protect policy. They're not
people
there
who
to protect
tweet
people.
And people on Facebook.
I totally agree. And what I've seen recently as well, there was the police recruitment force that was sat outside a mosque with a recruitment table, signing up Muslims, and even that there was some Muslims there with their mobile phones that was recording this taking place, and they were saying, "Why are the pigs here? Pigs are haram. Pigs are haram." So they were trying to make a joke out of it, but the police were actually recruiting, going out, specifically looking and targeting Muslims to come and join the police force. So that to me already says that they're already infiltrating some of the forces here by getting the police to come and recruit some of their attendees, if you like. But we also seen as well the police giving in to the Muslims. So there's been many occasions now, again, caught on camera, where Muslims have been arrested, even taken to the police station. Then a group of them will come and stand outside and they'll protest until those Muslims come out. And within about half hour, 45 minutes, the police will give in, the custody sergeant will release the perpetrators, and they'll write everything off like nothing ever happened. And they get rid of the charges. But we also seen, like I said, the same thing happened with the 1,400 young girls that were victims of the grooming gangs. They went, the guys got away with the punishment for that, and there was even a police what's his name, it was like he was very high up in the police force, who was caught being handed an envelope full of money in an Indian restaurant, and that very Indian restaurant was one of the places where a 12-year-old girl was raped and beaten, called a white British kuffar and stuff like that while she was being raped by one of the guys themselves. So they're taking bribes off of Muslims. They're giving in to the Muslims when they're kicking off. And now they're trying to recruit them, getting them inside. And this is the problem. Those people like Muhammad Hijab, Dilly Hussein, or the commentators that have these podcasts, where they openly talk about taking over Britain and taking over the West and conquest and that, and doing it as an inside job. They're being honest, and it's legitimately taking place before our very own eyes. And what you're seeing is the left going hand in hand with the Muslims, like they did in Iran and other places around the world. And eventually it will cave in. But what I believe with the British people, there is a boiling point. And there's that point where people do have enough, and a movement begins. And what we could potentially see in the future is not just riots, but something a lot more worse. And that's the biggest fear that I have. But again, with the policing system in Islam now, it's terrible.
Yeah. James Vickers, it would be worth sharing more clips to help justify claims made about Muslims. James, clearly we're just making this up. This is all science fiction. We just cooked this up 10 minutes before the show.
I'm more than happy to send them to you, Lloyd, and then you can present them in the next feed.
No, but I mean, obviously, there are questions that obviously elucidate the problem, and there are questions that actually really seek to attack and undermine a problem. And James, I'm sorry, but your questions really lean in that direction, whether you know this or not. These are questions that are used as weapons to attack and undermine a point, to deem it as false. Right.
There's one thing you could always say as well, Lloyd, is that, James, if you really do want to find out for yourself, you've got a search engine yourself that you can look for this stuff on your own. So you have a brain, you have hands. Go and have a
and
look.
also, there's no way that as I mean, this conversation is organic. It's not scripted. So we're not suddenly going to have that particular specific clip to hand. I don't have a crew here, 15 guys in the background doing research and managing the mics and the soundboard and all the video feeds and such to suddenly bring up that clip. Just
it's not as if this is not stuff that's been spoken of how many times in the media already. I mean, for crying out loud, if you've not seen the video footage of the Manchester airport situation, do you think we're really making it up? What about the grooming gangs? Do you think we're really making it up? You think about the guy that got his head chopped off, Lee Rigby, and the guy in France, but you think we're really making this stuff up? You think Rafe Hadel's stats, what he brought out on GB News about acid attacks, or Breitbart bringing out a point with reference to Donald Trump referring to London as being a shithole because of the influx and byproduct of what is supposed to have been called diversity, which hasn't proven to be diverse at all. All it's done is it's diverse, absolutely, but diverse and insular, not diverse and united.
Yeah.
So if you think that we're making this up, I'd have to turn around and say that you're
no, it's not that. The questions, I mean, it's just that it's these are overthought questions, and
we're going on to this now. This list of
just have a look through these. Yeah, thank you, Erkin. Very much appreciated.
Do you want to start from the top? Because you highlighted a very interesting point that I wanted to touch on as well.
Sure.
There is the Islamophobia definition. I thought that this was really interesting, where it says Islamophobia is rooted. You can just tear this whole thing apart. Islamophobia is rooted in racism. How the heck? First of all, you have black Muslims, white Muslims, brown Muslims, yellow Muslims. So how could you be racist? Because they're
conflating Muslims, people, with Islam and ideology. It's like if you're against socialism, you hate Russians, you hate Ukrainians, you hate Eastern Bloc people, you hate the Democrats, you want to murder them all. It's insane. It's exactly.
They want to tie it together so it's easier to arrest and imprison people for speaking against it. So if they can point the finger and say that person is a racist, it's more likely going to silence them and prevent people from speaking up.
Exactly. It's the branding with the pejorative to stifle criticism and conversation. But then he goes on to say, it's a type of racism that targets, notice this, expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. I would go straight to the Quran and say, I know where they got that from, where it's a synonym from the Islamic Quranic verse, where it turns around and says, causing mischief in the land because it's very ambiguous.
Yeah. Technically speaking, that is merely providing. Technically, that fitna is temptation away from Islam. Technically, that's all it is. It's tempting anyone away from Islam, either by a culture that would draw people away because it's interesting and fun, and then they leave Islam because they want to participate in Western culture, or propaganda, or evangelizing that would take people from Islam. All of those are illegal under Islam.
It just seems like a very ambiguous, open-ended, and you can interpret that as to what is a perceived racist or pejorative against Islam if it's subjective. It's not objective, it's subjective, which means that the person who's being insulted can perceive any insult that they want. And we're living in a day and age now where looking at somebody can be seen as a form of passive aggression or passive bullying or cyber bullying. You've got all these mini incremental variations now. So even looking at a Muslim in the wrong way can now be perceived as an attack on Muslimness.
Yeah. I want to say thank you to Erkin, and I want to raise a question here. This is really interesting double standard again at the two-tier issue. Thank you, Erkin. Yes, Islam called itself a deen. It self-defines itself as a deen, which is a totalitarian political system, social order, and legal system all in one. We don't have a matching concept within the West. We don't have such a matching concept. It's a completely alien concept to us in the West, and we need to think according to their ideas, not ours, not impose our false perceptions on it.
Yeah, but you know what that is? Can I just add on why that is?
Yeah, sure.
Because they want to establish the earth under men via the blessing of Allah, because they perceive it's Allah's will. So they'll think that they're working out Allah's will by wanting to turn the whole world into a Muslim planet, as an example. Whereas if you look at the biblical narrative, the Christians don't do that, because we're waiting for God's kingdom. Daniel 2:44 and Matthew 6:33. We're waiting for God to do it himself. We're not. God has not told us we've got to try and do it ourselves.
Yeah. Now, this is based on, oddly enough, the Politeia by Plato. It's actually based on Plato's Republic, oddly enough, the whole idea of, or that Muslims are following. It was, but that's a historical discussion for another time. I want to mention this point here. Bazalgette speaks of funerals. His mother died in 2019. Our condolences. It's always sad to lose a mother. It was a bank holiday weekend. I could not get a registration appointment for nearly 2 weeks. No burial arrangement can be made until the death is registered. When I said I was burying her the next day, I wasn't. They said, come now. Yet, how are Islamic funerals conducted in 2 days? Different rules for thee and for me.
It's true. And there's a lot of favoritism, what you're finding with the Muslim community as well. We're seeing it with housing. We're seeing it with almost anything. I mean, you only have to come here on a dinghy, invade the shore illegally. You'll get put in 4 or 5 star luxury accommodation. You'll get on the spot dentist and doctor appointments.
Get your private doctor on premise.
Yep. And you get fed free meals a day, plus given cash, electronics, push bikes, and God knows what else. Yet we've got veterans that have served in the army that are on the streets, that have got mental health problems, and they can't even afford a sleeping bag. So
the elderly that
are then you've got people that live in these communities. I know people that live in these communities. They've been here for 30, 40 years. They still can't even speak English. They need translators.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
the only time they seem to be speaking.
But then they can qualify for welfare. If they spoke English, they could get a job, and they might lose their welfare benefit.
Well, I was just going to say, the only time that they can speak English is when they find that the money that they're supposed to receive is not to the correct amount that they're expecting. All of a sudden, their English gets good then.
Oh, of course, and when they're in trouble. But there's also there was a clip that I seen today as well, which I will share with you, because you'll be interested in this, Lloyd. It was a clip of Anjem Chowdhury, who is now in prison, of him when he was speaking at this event. I think it was at a mosque, and he was saying that the welfare that they receive, or income support or job seekers allowance, is jizya for the Muslims. So that's what they class as for the Muslim community. The welfare that they receive from our government, from our taxpayers, is their jizya. I couldn't believe it when I seen that. It's incredible.
That's clever. You got to admit, when something comes across like that and he rationalizes like that, that's clever. It's a smart move.
I've spoken about the whole jizya in the past, and that's what they feel they're entitled to. That was a good question by Mark Ivy. I mean, the 20 largest religious terror organizations in the world, every single one is Islamic. And that's just the top 20 that I did here.
Yep.
I mean, and this is now a protected class of people.
There was an argument as well. You know, people have always said that they're more saying now, Islam is not a religion of peace; it's a religion of war and conquest.
Yes.
So the Muslim response nowadays, the latest one that I have heard is, but there won't be peace established until Islam is worldwide. But it begs the question. But if you look at the Muslim countries, they're at war with each other. You've got Sharia, you've got Sunni, you've got Salafi, you've got so many sects of Islam. They're all killing one another. So even if Islam did take over the world, say the Sunni side took over the majority of the Western countries, they would still be at war with one another. They'll be there until the last person is there, and even he would fight himself.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, Rowan, you got to remember, Islam is very much like the football hooligans of the 80s and 90s. You got the West Ham fighting the Chelsea fighting Manchester fighting Leeds and all that. But come an England game, the fans unite. It's the same way with Islam. They'll all have these rival factions because, you see, Muhammad said there's 73 sects and only one of them is real. So you're going to have fighting between the other 72 sects because they're all thinking that they're the true Islam. But when you strike after Islam or the Prophet, then they will unite against you.
Oh, of course. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, say if there was a call for jihad and a new empire was formed for the Islamic sect of the Sunni side, and they went to take over majority of the Western countries, even then, you're still going to see at the end of it, they'll be fighting amongst the Muslims themselves.
Yeah, because they don't know what the true Islam is. They don't know what Muhammad himself said. There's 73 sects. One of them is true. The other 72 are wrong.
Yeah.
You know, so that
I mean, it's clear that Muslims, for either reasons of hijrah, which is to spread Islam, so immigration for the purposes of bringing Islam to foreign countries, or because when they look at social media, they see just how good the West is, and they come over because they see that the West is successful. And I think one major issue that Muslims have is they are supposed to be the supreme people and the supreme ideology, the supreme set of ideas, and then they compare themselves to us. And you can do that easily in 5 minutes on Google, and you realize that they are dysfunctional. They are constantly at war. They are constantly fighting. They are poor. They have very little by way of science, technology. They contribute very little to the world.
The statistics that they done in Pakistan. Sorry, I just wanted to say before I forget the statistics that they did a thing in Pakistan where to see who watches the most pornographic material, if you like.
Yeah, and it's Pakistan.
Pakistan came up number one, but more than heterosexual porn that they watched, it was gay porn and animal porn. There was a lot more animal porn than there was heterosexual straight porn watched in Pakistan during the research year. I couldn't believe it when I seen that. I was like, wow, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, but so yeah, it's there. It's just not spoken about, but it's very much embedded within the culture. So I mean, I think, I think we would. I don't see that there's a peaceful resolution if you're not allowed to speak about this and make change if governments don't respond to the will of the people. But I don't see them doing so. So what are you left with, and what opportunities do you have to express yourself without being demonized and without being arrested? Right. This is really where we're at right now. Yeah. And on the basis, back to this document. So Islamophobia is rooted in racism. No, if you disagree with a set of ideas, that is not racist. Islam is a set of ideas. But of course, Islamophobia is just that's a false term, because what they mean is if you dislike anything to do with Islam, you are immediately a naughty boy, right? Mm-hmm. You are supposed to simply just go along, just bend over and accept it, right? And they say here...
Okay, I'll let you carry on. Sorry, Lloyd.
No, go on, Thunderous.
I was going to say, if you can go up a little bit to the first bullet point, or the first couple of bullet points. It says they're calling for aiding, instigating, or justifying the killing or harming of Muslims in the name of racist, fascist ideology or an extremist view of religion. How much broader can you get? Calling for aiding or instigating or justifying the killing of... You could infer... Now, I've noticed that the Labour government have withdrawn funding or the supplying of weapons to Israel in their war with Gaza. You can't help but think, has that, the government doing that, got something to do with this? Because if that's the case, then how does it sit with Muslims? For instance, England supplies Saudi Arabia weapons, but Saudi Arabia is killing Yemens with those weapons, Muslims killing Muslims. So how does the Muslim sit then when it's England or a country that's adopted the Islamophobia as a crime? And this is one of the parts of the criminal act, is when you're supplying weapons for the killing of Muslims, but you're supplying a Muslim to kill a Muslim. Where does the law under Islamophobia sit then?
Well, they ignore it. They keep their mouth shut, don't they? Out of fear of being called Islamophobic on one side.
Yeah. Then it goes on making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, and stereotypical allegations about Muslims as such, or of Muslims as a collective group, such as especially, but not exclusively, conspiracies about Muslims, entryism in politics, government, or other societal institutions, the myth of Muslim identity having a unique propensity for terrorism, and claims over a demographic threat posed by Muslims or of a Muslim takeover. Well, you're going to get demonetized and removed straight away, Lloyd, because you've done a lot of material with reference to Islamic.
But this is all basically they're demonizing facts. They're demonizing the truth about Islam.
It's why my first channel got removed, and I had to make this the second one. But if you look
just hold on 1 second, hang on. James Vickers now. Hold on a second. I could be getting this wrong. Me saying you should provide loads of sources is not to weaken your arguments, it's to strengthen them. My response to this is because judging, this is my perception of the tone of all the messages that have been come through. I said, James, this channel provides plenty of sources. You know that when I discuss Islam from the history and the dogma, the ideology, and so on, the methodology, I provide all of the sources. I show them on the screen. So this is not a scientific experiment today where we are now, providing everything. We didn't sit down and plan this. And guys, we have to have every video ready because we have to prove every word. You are strongly implying we do not have sources or facts as a basis for what we're saying. In other words, the fact that we aren't proving every single word we're saying, I mean, that basically hampers speech because now you've got to prove every word because it's presumed you're lying. It's presumed you're making up stories. It's presumed that you are simply spouting a narrative, and we are responding to issues. So James, I've read all of your comments from the beginning, and the tone that I infer, now I may be wrong, but the tone that I'm inferring is that you are using sophistry to undermine. It sounds like praise, it sounds like positive statements, but really this is coming across to me, rightly or wrongly, as you simply undermining our discussion by saying, well, you guys aren't using sources. You didn't prove that that the Haitians are eating the ducks, so therefore you're just making it up.
I think he's trying to say that it would strengthen our argument more if, say, what I was saying, if I could present the things. But if we did that, we'd be here all day.
And
yeah, exactly. There's also that.
Yeah, this conversation was ad hoc. I never met you before the conversation, Rowan, but tonight. No, so we started live the first time. So this is a very ad hoc conversation. But going back to the paragraph, it says that
but James, instead of trying to hog the limelight with your overthought implications, you can perhaps just listen to the conversation and participate by being silent for a little while.
It says here, is a Muslim identity having a unique propensity for terrorism, claims of a demographic threat. Now, I'm sure everybody has seen Asim al-Hakim, where he turned around and says that, we ask them to convert to Islam. If they don't want to convert to Islam, we'll give them the opportunity to pay the jizya.
Yeah.
And then he goes, then we'll cut off their threads. Cut off their heads. We gave you two options. So how can repeating that be Islamophobic when we're quoting your scholar who actually uses the gesture to his neck about this is what we're going to do to people if they don't convert or pay the jizya?
And there's not three options, there's two, because the third option was that was it. So but if you replace the word at the top, so if you go back up, please, Lloyd, to the first bullet point, it's exactly what they do, calling for aiding, instigating, or justifying the killing or harming
Jews.
of. Yeah, if you say Jews in the name of Islam, right? Where is the policing for that? Where is the prosecutions for that? Because that would be racist. Every week at these pro-Hamas rallies, these pro-terrorist rallies, that's all they do. They call for intifada. They call for jihad. They call for the desolation of a whole country. For they want real genocide to play out, not what they're calling out as genocide, a real genocide to take place in Israel. You couldn't write this, could you?
And I mean, they speak of accusing Muslims as a group, but it isn't ummah. They claim to be an ummah. They claim to be a single group that is adherent to the Sharia and to the Sunnah, right? Or Muslim majority states of inventing or exaggerating Islamophobia. Yes, because everyone's Islamophobic, just like everyone is racist and everyone's an ist of some type. There's that. And of course, ethnic cleansing or genocide perpetrated against Muslims, the only people perpetrating genocide against Muslims is Muslims. What, 700,000 Muslims killed in Syria by Syrian Muslims? Not a peep. Why? Because no Jews, no news. Now you're looking at what? There are 2 million, 3 million Yemeni, maybe as many as 10 million Yemeni children that are starving, and Yemen is firing $1 million rockets. Every rocket costs $1 million, and they're firing off these rockets to establish, the Yemeni Houthis, who are a terrorist organization who took over a portion of the entire country of Yemen from its legitimate government. And you've got a massive war that was happening, Muslims fighting against Muslims, no Jews, no news. So you've got hundreds of thousands, 500,000 Yemenis dead, I believe.
Have you seen what they do as well with the?
So go on.
So with the footage that they capture in places like Yemen and Syria, some of the pictures and the videography of the victims or casualties in Yemen, the Hamas will use that as propaganda to sway on the left in the West to then come out and support the Palestine in these rallies. Which I don't know if you've heard of Gazawood. They're on
Yeah,
X.
yeah, I follow the channel. It's very interesting. Yeah,
It's absolutely, when you see the level of propaganda that is done, the setups that they actually have in Palestine to reenact and create videos of, let's say Israel hostage taking and stuff like that. It is so incredible because it's an actual what do you call it? It's an industry that they've got out there. You've got the same like people in the same clips,
same actors over and over. The same actors. You see dead bodies moving. You see them preparing the scenes. You see them spraying the fake blood, the cameraman, the lighting, the scenes being rehearsed. It's insanely funny sometimes. But
have you seen the area that they've actually set up to do these scenes and some of the crying bits and stuff like that? It's incredible. It's massive, absolutely massive.
Even he's dead now, and one of those, and I've got all his material on my YouTube channel, and it's John Pilger. Even John Pilger said that the white helmets going back to Syria is a CIA construct. Now that's John Pilger, making a comment like that, who very rarely comes out in his latter period of life on comments of that nature within the Middle East. But when John Pilger turns around and says something like that, you've got to take that seriously. And Richard D. Hall, who's going through a situation at the moment I don't know if you know much about him, Lloyd or Roan. Richard D. Hall, he's been taken to court at the moment over the Manchester bombing because he thinks it's he's written a book referring to it as a staged incident, or like a Gladio attack or a false flag attack. But he did some remarkable footage or found some remarkable footage of these staged bombings where a car bomb would go off, but no bomb went off. Somebody had found some CCTV footage of a car that had previously exploded. Then some people running up, pretended that they'd exploded, been involved in this bomb attack, lying down on the ground. There was blood sort of like splattered here, then everywhere, fake blood. And then after shooting this image for about a few moments, then they all got up and sort of like had a cup of tea afterwards. The propaganda that comes from the Muslim world in order to garner sympathy is absolutely perverse.
It's playing the victim is what's stage 3, I think, of their whole conquest idea or their strategy that they have, playing victimhood in Western countries. But what I was going to say with Gazawood as well, just briefly, Lloyd, I'm in very good communication with the person behind Gazawood. And we're going to be creating a very long documentary of all those clips put together. So I'll send that to you once that's been done.
Yeah. If you know him, perhaps we can get him on the channel, because I do follow him on X. And also, the Uyghur Muslims in China. Muslims don't care about that.
Dude, Lloyd, do you remember you and I discussed that as far back as, I think, 2018 on the Gin and Tonic show when I mentioned it, or 2019?
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they really don't care. It's crazy. I mean, you've got you accusing Muslim citizens of being more loyal to the Ummah. That's the Islamic transnational state, or to their countries of origin, or to the alleged priorities. I mean, how many Muslims have not integrated, don't speak English, have formed little rabats, little Muslim communities, and stay there following their own culture, and have not integrated into the UK? They still wear Islamic dress. They still wear... I mean, you don't see Germans who move to the UK wearing lederhosen.
Sorry, Lloyd, is this going to be part of the new legislation for Islamophobia?
This is what's been this is the second draft by the all-party parliamentary group.
But if you ask any Muslim, who are you more loyal to, Allah or the Queen? They're going... I mean, we had members of parliament that are Muslims go in and they said, I am not going to swear my oath to the king.
On the Bible.
Yeah,
use the Quran.
Or on the Bible, I am going to do my oath on the Quran. But they didn't want to do it towards the Queen. So they did theirs separately, and they had to do it somewhere else because they didn't want to pledge their allegiance to the royal family. So because their allegiance is to Allah. So how on earth can they put this as a definition of Islamophobia? They are more loyal to the Ummah. But it's just like us Christians. Us Christians are more like we're more loyal to our God Yahweh or Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, if you like, than what we would to any human on planet Earth. So that's just barbaric. That's just nonsense.
Of course,
It's gaslighting.
That question you just brought up now about the Antichrist, that's that the Muslims are waiting for. What was it? Can you bring it up again, please, Lloyd?
The Dajjal.
But it says no, not that one. The one you just had up a moment ago.
No. This question here.
Yeah, interesting how Islam is waiting for the Messiah to come, and at the same time, the Bible is waiting for the Antichrist to arrive. Can I just give this Mark Ivy some correction? If you go to 1 John 2:22, you'll find that the Scripture not only defines what the Antichrist is, which is someone that denies the Father and the Son, but it also tells you that the Antichrists were already prevalent in the first century. An Antichrist is basically somebody that denies the Father and the Son. It's not one person. It's not somebody that embodies, or a body of people that embody the mentality. It is anybody. Jews are Antichrist, Muslims are Antichrist, Sikhs are Antichrist, Hindus are Antichrist, atheists are defo Antichrist. Anybody that does not accept the Father and the Son, by definition, is Antichrist. It is not one person.
You could say the Church of England has gone Antichrist.
Oh, of course, well, they are. They believe
They've
in
gone
Darwinian
woke.
evolution. They believe in Darwinian evolution. They invest in GEC Marconi. They invest in the stock shares. They live in a shameless luxury, while the adherents of the churches that go every Sunday are living in poverty.
I mean, they've gone woke, and now how many Anglican churches are now hosting raves? First they were doing the silent raves, and now suddenly the raves are no longer silent, and now they're becoming nightclubs.
Lloyd, they're not even churches anymore. They're going to change the word church to community.
Yeah, they have done. Yeah, there's that. And then
oh my God, they've gone like the Unitarian Church. Yeah. It's like social club. That is very shocking.
Did you see that female priest as well who held up a sign
saying, "We're all Muslims now"?
Muslims. I couldn't believe.
What about the one saying that if Jesus was here now, he would also support abortion?
Oh my!
Yeah, well, there are some issues. Look. I mean, look. We know that the church is under attack. The church has always been under attack, but also you have socialists who are obviously attacking the church. You have Muslims attacking the church. I mean, this is just how that is, right? It's always been like that. I don't think it's going to change. It might get worse, but obviously we have to then assert our positions. We have to fortify the church. I don't think that. I mean, if I say, well, my name is Lloyd and I don't like what my church is doing, I'm going to start my own church and I will be the true church. I don't think that's a wise thing. You have the institution. It needs to be cleansed. It needs to be renewed. And rather than you claiming that you are now the one true prophet and pope, that's an issue.
There was one sentence that stuck with me from the rally that we had in July, and that was someone speaking on behalf of Christianity, and they said what is needed in this country is renewal, reformation, and a renaissance. And I completely stick with that. It's completely true. He was a Christian.
We can just go back to the old ways. Why not? I mean, they worked, but clearly the whole queer movement is designed to destroy what works, destroy what is established, and go towards hyper individualism, which is basically narcissism of the highest order.
So I've got I don't know if you've seen the video of the bishop who was at the rally last month, the Tommy Robinson rally in Trafalgar Square, Bishop Kai Dewar. He was speaking about more masculine Christianity and Christianity going back to the way that it's always been.
But masculinity is toxic, Ron. You can't have that.
So he was talking about a more stronger, more loyal, if you like, Christianity, and how it should go back to its original ways. He was denounced from his parish because of his viewpoints and where he stands on politics. I've got him coming on shortly once I've hit my minimum what you need to go live on my new channel. He's going to be coming on and having a discussion with me as well about Christianity in the West as general, and how it's it's gone complete, like you said, woke, if you like. But they're only one step away from denouncing Christ or taking a shahada. That's the way I see the Church of England.
Yeah, let's maybe get back to this. We can just finish this document, just the major points here. denying Muslim populations the right to self-determination, and by claiming that the existence of an independent Palestine or Kashmir is a terrorist endeavor. Why is Islamophobia, which is supposed to be about something religious, trying to agitate for political
Do you
causes?
know what that is? They may as well turn around and say, if they implement this law, then they can turn around and say, well, we want to determine that Luton have its own self-determination by votes, because if the Muslims outvote the local residents of Luton, then they can declare Luton their own state, independent state of the rest of England. That's what it means. That's like me inviting a Muslim to come and live in my house. He then invites his wife over. And they say, I've got a 2-to-1 vote against me, right? And they can turn and say, well, we determined that this house become a mosque. That's what it is, So it's basically wherever they get the upper hand by.
But they're recruiting the state to mandate Muslim political agendas. I mean, that's crazy. That this is now co-opting of the state, getting the state to. It's like the state is now. The state has now adopted wokeism as an official religion and transgenderism as an official ideology, and now on top of that, they want to adopt Islamic causes. I mean, well, what do these supposedly religious Muslim causes have to do with the British state? And why must this be imposed upon the British people? And to make illegal saying, well, yeah, I think that Hamas are terrorists. Their charter is a terrorist charter. They are a terrorist organization. They are murderers and they are thieves. And how did the leadership all become billionaires?
Mm-hmm. By bringing this definition in and this document that I'm seeing, they're going to make it even more easier for the Muslims now to do what they're exactly threatening to do.
And you can't say that Muhammad was a PDF file. I mean, by Western standards, he is.
But you can call him maps. If you can't call him paedophile, then I'll call him by what the European Union say paedophiles are to be referred to. They're to be referred to as a minor attracted person that was instigated as law.
I prefer the term minor attracted PDF file.
I'm sure you do. But the interesting thing in this, all right, and one has to bear in mind at the timing of this, if you go back to the original formation of this by the Muslim Council of Britain, that was 2019. Yasser Qadi came out in 2020 and made this comment with the famous holes in the narrative speech. You and I did a show a couple of months ago, Lloyd, where we discussed the Aruf and Qira'at, and you brought up a document that goes back as far as 2010. Now, if you go back to Yasser Qadi's comments, he turns around and says that the Muslims have a red line that they do not go beyond, but the Western academics, they cross that line. We're in a period of time now where the Muslim narrative of Islam is totally being dismantled. This seems to serve as a counter, as a bulwark to stop. Because if you start introducing this in the public, at what point is it not going to be instituted in universities where they can't research into things about Islamic origins and Islamic sources? For instance, Dan Gibson and the direction of the prayer, the Qibla. What about J. Smith and the origins of the Quran? All your work that you've done historically with the Sharia, with the origins of Mecca and pagan idolatry, the sources of some of the practices of Islam and where they've grafted it on from. All of that will come under that last bullet point where basically they're stifling any research that undermines Islamic origins. That's what it
and you can't talk about Muslims as being sex groomers when 95% of the sex groomers, the rapists, the rape gang managers, I guess, in the UK are literally Muslims.
And also, notice what that bullet point says, e.g. Muhammad as being a pedophile. You'll notice yet again, and you and I have discussed this many times, Lloyd, it is Muhammad Muslims worship, not Allah. Did you notice in all of this discussion, most of it is centered on Muhammad being attacked, not Allah being attacked?
They're implementing the Sharia. I mean, this is all this is. This is merely endorsing the Sharia. I mean, this is shocking. I mean, this is very frightening. We've got nearly 2 hours, guys. It's 1 hour, 52 minutes. We've been live.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
I will have to leave shortly, Lloyd. I'm so sorry. But
okay, cool. So final word to you, because we can't say that Islam was spread by the sword when Muslims will happily explain how Islam was spread by the sword.
They're proud of it.
I mean, you've got this thing, the Atlas of the Islamic Conquest, that Muslims proudly put out, but you can't say that. I mean, they'll happily publish books like this on Islamic conquests with literally hundreds of Islamic wars to establish Islam worldwide, to enforce it by the sword and others, but you can't say that because that would be
I think you've just got to sort of got to be smart with it. If you can't say that Islam was spread to the sword, you just got to ask questions. Can you explain, for instance, to me, how did Islam get manifest in India? How did Islam get manifest in Iran?
Well, what were the Muslims doing attacking Spain in the 600s and France in the 700s?
What were they doing there? Just ask, if you can't use the word attack, just say, what were they doing there? Were they knocking on doors, converting like Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yeah. But the whole aim of this document will be to silence those who speak against Islam or any kind of crime done by a Muslim. And what it will end up doing, it will backfire completely. And you're going to see a massive rise in crime. You're going to see more sentiments of Islam being preached on the streets publicly. We're going to see more grooming gangs come out of nowhere.
Well, if you can't speak about things, there is going to be a violent backlash. This is inevitable.
With what Rowan was saying there, and I think it was something I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, all this will serve to do, from the Muslim mindset, they will perceive this as the will of Allah. Allah is giving traction to Islam. They will see this and perceive this as a victory, right, or a manifest victory, and they will further embolden them to act with immunity and impunity.
And you'll have idiots like Muhammad Hijab that will publicly declare that as well. Yeah. They will actually go on it and say, in a victory for Islam, this is, we need to press forward now into the, what we're supposed to be doing. And you'll see a massive, let's say, attack from the Muslim community on the British majority with this. It's incredible. It's really frightening because, like I was saying, no one will want to speak about anything Islamic or anything to do with Muslims whatsoever.
Can I just add on that? The interesting thing is when you really finally analyze it, you've got to look at it from the perspective of, if we're going to accept the biblical narrative as a reality, who controls the world? Islam is certainly the jewel in Satan's crown. The one thing that Satan doesn't want to do, or any of the demons want to do, is the proselytizing, or if you like, the good news being spread, as Matthew 24:40, Matthew 28:19-20, Romans 10:13, 14, 15, Isaiah chapter 2 verses 2-4, about the preaching and teaching campaign in the time of the end. It seems that this seems to be all stifled against the proselytizing with reference to the biblical narrative, because when you start talking about the biblical narrative in the face of a Muslim, their perception as far as Muslimness is concerned, or perceived Muslimness is concerned, is going to be perceived as a direct attack on Islam.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy how these go on. So final word to you, Patriotic Christian.
I was going to say as well, lastly, is that for those that do speak up against it and find themselves in prison, like the gentleman who got 18 months was chanting, "Who the F is Allah?" they're going to find themselves in even more danger, because the prison populations now are predominantly run by the Muslim gangs that are inside there. And you're getting a lot of people now that are going inside, especially younger men, that are joining Islam out of fear, because they want to become part of a brotherhood. Some do it to get extra food, and some do it because if you're not a Muslim, you can't get a job in prison. So radicalization in prisons is very rife. We're getting it in lots of institutes now as well, including even in the workplace. They're even doing it in the workplace. So it's quite frightening that even if you do say anything and you do get punished, that you would then run the risk of being hurt when you're being punished as well for it.
I know a local Jehovah's Witness, and one of his responsibilities is to actually go to local prisons and preach to people in prison. And he taught, in a conversation I had with him a few weeks ago, because I brought the subject up, and from how does he deal with when he goes to prison. And he said to me that the convert or get hurt is a reality. It's not a myth that has been purported in the media. It's a very real reality. That
I had it happen to me. I was when I found myself in prison in 2019. This was before I was Christian. I was an atheist, and my testimony is out there if anyone wants to hear it. It's on Reasoned Answers with Hedaya. But I found myself in prison, and I had the same threat with the cellmate that I was in. He got 2 men, Muslim men, to come into the cell with me, and they said, if you do not take your Shahada by 5 p.m. tomorrow, we are going to stab you in the showers. That is basically what's going to happen to you. I had no choice then, but for late at night to then wrap up the guy that was in the cell with me and make sure that I was given only single cell status and put somewhere else. Luckily, I was transferred to another prison. And even then, in that prison, on that wing, you had the Muslims eating separately to everyone else. We were classed as kufar. So they were eating elsewhere. There was, I'd say, 20, 25 of them. And the looks that you got from them. And if you was to do anything or fall out with one of them, they would all come in and attack you.
Oh,
so I've seen it firsthand, what it's like in the British prisons and institutions of how they are taking over them as well.
And this is supposed to be God-fearing people. One has to ask the question, if you're so loyal and godly, and how the heck are you in prison in the first place as criminals? Does anybody not see that as a problem?
Because God-fearing to them is completely different to how we see it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's completely antithetical. So, guys, it's been 2 hours. We should wrap up. So, so Ron, final word to you, because I know you said you have to go. So, you're planning a new event soon, and maybe a final word about that as well.
Yeah. So, we've got another rally that's going to be taking place. We're actually taking it to the man's front door. We're going to be starting the rally outside Downing Street. That is the most information I've got now. Is going to be starting there. Whether it's staying there, I don't think so, because it's too much of a small area. So it'll probably be somewhere like Trafalgar Square or somewhere like that. We believe, I believe personally, there's going to be anywhere between 150 to 200,000 people this time, maybe more. It's going to be the biggest and most important event of the British public's interest, I believe. It's going to be the most patriotic, most Christian celebrated event that we've had. So I'm going to be part of security and crowd control for the next one. So we're basically now just setting up for that. But there's going to be a documentary that will be aired on the massive screen by Tommy, which will expose Keir Starmer, it will expose the establishment, and also prove everything we've been talking about tonight, the 2-tier judiciary, 2-tier policing system, is true, and what they've been up to, even behind closed doors. So there's a lot of information that people don't know about that's going to be seen and brought to light. And it's also going to be a day of celebration. We know as well that they're going to do anything they possibly can. They've got the picture. They just want the title now for something to go wrong. And then they're going to label it all as far right. But hopefully it'll be a peaceful demonstration. Everyone will behave. And yeah, it's going to be amazing.
It's not far right. It's very right.
It's not far right. It's
Completely
just right.
Totally right.
Yeah, that's it. But if anyone wants to support me, obviously I've got my channel as well on YouTube now. It's got a second channel. My first one got removed because of anti-Muslim rhetoric. But yeah, my new one now is called the Patriotic Christian UK. So
links in the description, guys.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. I'm 3 subs away from being able to live stream myself.
Right. Yeah, so go and support him so you can get that going. And I believe we'll be doing a talk in the coming week again.
Yeah.
So one-on-one. Thunderous, final word to you, because I said plenty on this channel. So, with your mellifluous voice.
I just want to thank everybody for being a part of the show and being in the audience with their questions and their chat. I want to thank you, Lloyd, for inviting me on the show this evening. And it was certainly a pleasure to speak to you for the first time tonight, Roan. I hope that we can meet again on this show with Lloyd and have another interaction about whatever's going to take place in the future.
100%. Definitely. It'd be good.
Yeah. So, guys, thank you all very much. Thank you for a very enlightening conversation. Very interesting, very difficult topics. I mean, it's emotional. We say things that if we'd thought about it more carefully, would phrase them differently. But these are things that need to be discussed. And of course, you cannot expect that people who are discussing things are going to be perfect in every word that they say and phrase everything correctly or have the correct view. We might change our view on certain things next week. But of course, as you know, the left and others are going to be uncharitable about everything that we say. That's just how that is. But of course, we've said it, and that's that. And guys, thank you very much for all the support. Thank you for all the donations. I really appreciate that. And we'll see you guys very shortly. I'm again on tomorrow night with discussing the cancer of jihad. So with Paul Sutcliffe, and we'll be on again soon. So guys, thanks, and we'll be on. And also Friday, I am traveling. I'm away again out of the country for a week. But once I come back, I've got a couple of back-to-back talks with Susama Dakdok and Odon Lafontaine next Saturday. So that's going to be fascinating. It's going to be really interesting. Usama is a really, really fascinating guy, knowledgeable. So guys, thank you very much. God bless. We'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.